Gapminder Project by Dixon and Michael Wright. We have decided to study the changes in overall population growth compared to the rate of primary school completion. We hypothesize that as a country's population grows, we will see a decrease in primary school completion rates. Gapminder only has a select amount of information on these specific variables, so the pool of countries with this information available is extremely varied. Because of our limited pool of information, we wanted to use some countries that had a good amount of data behind them. With all of this in mind, we chose 3 countries to primarily examine: India, China, and Japan. Starting with India, their data starts in 1971 with a primary school completion rate of 39.5% and a population of 570 million. Over the course of the next 24 years, India sees an exponential growth in both its primary school completion rate and its population. In 1995, India's primary school completion rate was 71.5%, and its population had grown to a total of 964 million. However, as India's population kept growing, the primary school completion rates would drop for the next 5 years until 2000, when it was 68.7%. After this downturn, though, India would see a crazy amount of growth for the next decade. By 2009, India's primary school completion rate had grown to 95.7%, and their population had amassed 1.22 billion. While the population would continue to grow steadily, the primary school completion rate would stay 90% above for the next 12 years. As of 2021, India has a population of 1.41 billion and a primary school completion rate of 97.64. Japan is the second country we chose to analyze. Japan's information on Gapminder starts in 1970 with a 99.8% primary school completion rate and a population of 108 million. Their number would drop from here, though, until 1979, where the primary school completion rate had fallen to 89.1%, while the population increased to 117 million. After this dip, the completion rate seemed to slowly go back to the original percentage during the 1980s. Meanwhile, the population growth slowed to a staggering pace. This trend of staggering progress will continue throughout the 1990s, with Japan's data on Gapminder concluding in the year 2000. For China, their data starts in 1989, with their primary school completion rate at 100%, and a population of 1.3 billion growing each year. The first big change we see is right before the turn of the century. In 1993, China's primary school completion rates plummeted to 90.6% over the course of the next 4 years. Then it remained steady until around 2007, when it spiked back up to 99.3%. The primary school completion rate has not had any other significant changes since then, and the population as of 2009 is 1.34 billion. After concluding our analysis, we found that our hypothesis was varied in its results. Our hypothesis was not necessarily incorrect nor correct, but dependent on multiple factors that played a role in their population growth and primary school completion rate, such as financial status, geography, culture, laws, and policies. However, that being stated, our hypothesis was incorrect as a statement for most countries in general. Some countries did align with our predicted hypothesis. Countries like India show that as the population growth rate decreases, the primary school completion rate increases, and with much larger countries, it is easier to show the changes in these statistics. However, not all countries follow this trend. As previously mentioned, there are multiple factors that play a role in a country's population growth and primary school completion. For example, up until 2016, China had a one-child policy to slow down the population growth of the country to better distribute resources and prevent overpopulation. This policy did cause the population growth to decrease as intended, but as a result, it caused children to be looked into more and receive better education, allowing for primary school completion rate to increase among other things. On the contrary, Japan has a large problem with their population growth, or more accurately, a lack of. The problem being that Japan has an aging population, where more and more people are getting older, and many of them are choosing not to have children, causing the amount of retired people in Japan to exceed the amount of children. The death rate in Japan is nearly double than the birth rate because of this. Another variable that may affect the population growth itself when it comes to primary school completion is the possibility of brain drain. Brain drain occurs when the educated or intelligent people emigrate from a country to find better schooling or more opportunities in another country, thus lowering the country's overall intelligence and slows progress. This variable could also be a factor why some countries are slower to have primary school education than others. One thing that we use to more effectively organize the countries better and help determine their placement is the demographic transition model. The demographic transition model places a country based on its birth rate, death rate, and overall population growth. The demographic transition model has 5 stages that a country will go through, with each stage showing different predictions of where a country will lie. Many countries lie on different sections of the demographic transition model, with countries like the US being placed on stage 4, where birth rate is starting to match our death rate and the population growth as a whole will soon begin to stagnate and possibly decline. Countries like China and India are currently on stage 3 of the demographic transition model. This explains why we're starting to see a less rapid growth of population and their overall birth rate declining. What's good about this is that as we see the population growth slow, countries transitioning will start to have fewer children, with more time and effort being put into said children, allowing them to complete primary school. However, countries further along the demographic transition model are starting to see the opposite problem, such as Japan, who's considered to be in stage 5 of the demographic transition model. Because of Japan's rapidly decreasing birth rate, we see that primary school completion actually starts decreasing because of the lack of children to attend those schools. And according to the demographic transition model, the population growth rate will decline even more, and their death rate will continue to exceed its birth rate. In conclusion, in our hypothesis we stated, if the population growth rate decreases, then the rate of primary school completion will increase. It is correct and incorrect at the same time. To better understand the variables behind the data, we looked at the demographic transition model that ranks countries based on the birth, death rates, and their overall population. We also looked at some other variables and factors that could potentially impact our data. Ultimately, though, we found that India's data did support our hypothesis, while Japan and China did not. Thank you.